today's video, we are talking about circles, and we are going to talk about the circumference of a circle. So, our learning target is I can find circumference of circles. Please write down the date that you're watching this video and write down what you already know. You may not know much about circumference, but you know some things about circles. So you can write about that. And then we have some vocabulary today. First vocabulary word today is pi. Pi is the ratio of a circle's circumference and diameter. Next we have circumference. Circumference is the distance around the outside edge of a circle. Next is radius. Radius is the distance from the edge of a circle to its center, halfway across the circle. And then finally is diameter. Diameter is all the way across the circle through its center. So get all of that written down, pausing the video here, and then restart when you are ready to go. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is what is pi? Pi is a very, very, very famous number, but not everyone knows what it actually means. I'm sure you've heard of it. But what pi actually is, if we were to measure a whole bunch of circular objects, and we were to measure their circumference, which the circumference, if we were to just draw a circle, and this is not going to be a perfect circle, but imagine this is a perfect circle. And we were to take their circumference, which is the outside edge, and then we were to measure their diameter. Now the diameter goes through the center, and then it goes across the circle to either side. That's the diameter. If we were to divide those, we would get exactly pi. So pi, which is often represented by a symbol that looks like that is the circumference divided by the diameter of a circle. And this is something people discovered a long, long time ago. And the more accurately you can measure the circumference and the diameter of a circle, the more accurately you'll get pi. And pi, we know, is a decimal that goes on forever and ever and ever, and it never repeats and it never ends. It's 3.14159, on and 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 on. We could keep saying digits of pi forever, and you can look it up and you can find people have found millions of digits of pi. But all it is it is the circumference divided by the diameter. Um, that is a really, really helpful thing to help us find circumference of a circle. So in this picture, we have the circumference, we have the diameter. We can also write down the radius. The radius is just half of the diameter. So the radius goes from one edge to the center of the circle. So knowing that pi equals the circumference divided by the diameter, we can also say, well, we can just rearrange this a little bit and multiply by the diameter in each side and say that the circumference then is just the diameter times pi. And since the diameter is just two of the radius, well, that means that the circumference is also 2 of the radius times pi. So these 4 formulas are what we're going to be using. So again, this is the definition of pi. This just means that the diameter is double the radius. 2 radiuses make up a diameter. This formula is the same thing as this formula. We've just moved the diameter and put it next to the pi. We've multiplied by diameter on each side and said diameter times pi now equals circumference. And then this formula is also the same. We've just replaced these two radiuses equals diameter. Well, two radiuses equals diameter. So all of these things are things that are going to be really, really helpful in solving problems. And so I'm going to show you how this works. So the first thing we're going to look at is finding the radius or the diameter when we know the other. So let's say that I told you that I knew that the radius of a circle was 5 centimeters. Well, if the radius of a circle is 5 centimeters, well, the diameter then has to be 10 centimeters. If the radius is 10 meters, then the diameter has to be 20 meters. We can go the opposite direction as well. If I tell you that the diameter is 6 inches, the radius has to be half of that. So if the diameter is 6 inches, then the radius has to be inches. If the diameter is 8 centimeters, what is the radius? So this is your first check here. Your first check for this video will be if the diameter is 8 centimeters, what is the radius? I just want the number. You do not need to give me the units. Okay. So now we're going to move on to looking at the circumference. So let's say that we have a circle, and I tell you that this circle has a diameter of 17 centimeters. Well, let's go look at our formulas. I see that I have the formula circumference equals diameter times pi. So if the circumference equals diameter times pi, that means that my circumference equals 17 times pi. Now, there's two types of ways that you might be asked to write an answer. Sometimes you'll be asked to leave your answer in terms of pi. In this case, you would just write 17 pi, or if you were writing it on Schoology, 17 pi. The other thing you might be asked to do is use 3.14. In that case, you would do 17 times 3.14. In this case, we would get 53.38. The other thing that could be happen would be it could say use the pi button. This would mean that on your calculator, on your iPad, you have a button that looks like a pi symbol. In this case, you would have to actually use that symbol. For here, we would do 17, and then on your calculator, the symbol that looks like pi, and you would get, in this case, 53.41 if we rounded to hundredths. It is very important that you pay attention to the directions and write your answer the way that it asks to write your answer. Otherwise, you are not going to get the right answer. So we are going to continue practicing today with finding it all three ways, okay? We can also be asked to go the opposite direction. So if I could tell you to find the diameter, so if I told you that the circumference is about 37.68 yards, and I asked you to find the diameter, remember my formula circumference equals diameter times pi. Well, I know my circumference is 37.68, so that equals something times pi. In this case, I'm going to divide by, well, let's try 3.14 on my calculator and see what happens. 37.68 divided by 3.14 on my calculator gives me 12. So my diameter is 12. I could also be asked to find the radius. So let's say that we were told that the circumference equals 62.8, and we were asked to find the radius. Well, let's start by finding the diameter. Just like up above, the circumference equals 62.8. That equals the diameter times pi. We can start by dividing by 3.14. 62.8 divided by 3.14 gives me 20. That's the diameter. So if 20 equals the diameter, the radius is half the diameter. So the radius equals 10. It's really important in these problems to make sure that we're remembering the relationship between a radius and a diameter, and remembering that a radius is half of the diameter. And then the last problem we're going to do, we're going to find the circumference again. And this time we're going to start with the radius. So let's say we were given a radius of 9 centimeters. Well, we know that the circumference equals the diameter times pi. We know that the diameter is 2 times the radius, so the circumference can be 2 times the radius times pi. So that's going to be 2 times 9 times pi. So I would like you to use 3.14 for pi and put this in as your second check. So this will be your second check. Use 3.14 for pi, and this will be your second check for this video. Thanks so much for watching. Please let me know if you have any questions. Have a great day.